I was abandoned 5 days after I was born, but for some reason, my biological mother left me at the door of a local criminal organization in Ravenwood City so that I could survive. Even wrapped in my baby blanket, I instinctively cried out the moment a group of rough-looking men frowned down at me. "Dad!" The hardened men froze on the spot. For a moment, none of them spoke. They looked at each other with confused expressions, as if they weren't sure what they were supposed to do with a tiny baby suddenly calling them father. One of them rubbed the back of his neck. "Maybe we should keep the kid." That was how my life began. From that day forward, I gained 108 dads. But the truth was, our home was basically a hideout full of outlaws. Every single one of them appeared on Ravenwood City's most wanted list. So in order to avoid bringing trouble to my dads, I lived a very quiet and careful life for more than 10 years. I kept my head down. I stayed out of arguments. And I focused on studying. Everything stayed peaceful until I reached high school. That was when the bullying started. And that was when everything began to fall apart. High school was the first place where my quiet life stopped working. Until then, I had managed to stay invisible. I studied hard, avoided conflicts, and made sure I never caused problems that might reach my dads. That rule had kept everything peaceful for more than a decade. But Ravenwood High was different. That was where I met Madison Cole. Everyone in school knew her name. Madison was the kind of girl who walked through the hallway like she owned the entire building. Her family was rich, powerful, and well-connected in Ravenwood City. Teachers treated her differently, and students followed her like shadows. Wherever she went, a small group of girls followed behind her. They laughed when she laughed. They glared at whoever she glared at. And eventually, they started looking at me. At first, it was small things. Whispers when I passed by, giggles during class, someone knocking my books off my desk and pretending it was an accident. I tried to ignore it. I had dealt with worse things in life than childish teasing. More importantly, I couldn't afford to create trouble. If anything escalated, teachers might contact parents, and my parents were the last people the school should ever meet, so I endured it quietly. But Madison wasn't satisfied with small games. One afternoon after class, I walked into the girls' bathroom to wash my hands before heading home. The moment the door closed behind me, I realized something was wrong. Madison and 3 of her friends were already inside. They were leaning against the sinks like they had been waiting. One of them slowly pushed the door shut. Another girl locked it. My stomach tightened. Madison tilted her head slightly and looked at me with a cold smile. "Well," she said slowly, "look who it is." One of her friends lifted her phone and pointed the camera toward me. The red recording light blinked. Madison crossed her arms. "Why are you staring at me in class, scholarship girl?" she asked. "I wasn't," I replied quietly. Her smile widened. "Oh, then why do you look at me like you hate me? I don't hate you." Before I could say anything else, a bottle of cold water splashed directly onto my head. The shock made me gasp. My uniform clung to my skin as water ran down my hair and neck. The girls burst into laughter. Another girl stepped forward and grabbed my sleeve, pulling hard until the fabric tore with a sharp ripping sound. Madison watched the whole scene like she was enjoying a show. "How dare you look at me like that?" she said. Then someone shoved me. Hard. Pain shot through my shoulder as I slammed into the sink. Another splash of cold water followed. The camera stayed fixed on my face the entire time. My heart was pounding now. "Stop," I said, but they ignored me. Another shove came from the side. Instinctively, I reached out and grabbed the nearest arm to keep myself from falling. Unfortunately, the arm I grabbed belonged to Madison. Everything happened in the next few seconds. She lost her balance. I lost mine. And suddenly both of us were falling backward toward the stairwell behind us. Someone screamed. The world flipped upside down. Then, everything went dark. When I opened my eyes again, the ceiling above me was bright white. The smell of disinfectant filled the air. I was lying on a bed in the school infirmary. My head throbbed, and my body felt heavy. Before I could fully sit up, a sharp voice cut through the room. "Finally awake?" I turned my head. Standing beside the bed was Ms. Harper, the school's discipline teacher. Her arms were crossed, and her expression looked full of disgust. "Did you push Madison Cole down the stairs?" she demanded. My heart skipped. "What? She told us everything," Ms. Harper continued coldly. "You attacked her first." "That's not... So after she hit you," the teacher continued sharply, "you tried to kill her? Is that it?" My chest tightened. "I didn't push her," I said quickly. "She and her friends cornered me in the bathroom. They threw water on me and tore my clothes. I only grabbed her because..." Ms. Harper cut me off immediately. "Enough." Her voice was sharp and impatient. "Madison is badly injured. She fell from the third floor, my fingers clenched against the blanket. I fell too. That doesn't change what you did, she replied coldly. Then she leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. You're absolutely heartless. The words hit harder than the fall. She straightened up and pointed toward the phone lying on the bedside table. Call your parents, she said. Right now. My body went cold. I want to see what kind of people raised a girl like you. A chill ran down my spine. I swallowed slowly. Ms. Harper, I asked quietly, are you sure you want to call my parents? The moment the words left my mouth, slap. A loud sound exploded inside the room. Pain burned across my face as my head snapped to the side. For a second, I couldn't even understand what had happened. Then I saw the man standing beside the bed. His eyes were filled with anger. Richard Cole, Madison's father. You little brat, he growled. Call your parents and apologize to me. My body collapsed to the floor. Half my face throbbed from the impact. But what hurt more was what happened next. Ms. Harper acted like she hadn't seen anything. Instead, she immediately turned toward Richard Cole with a flattering smile. Mr. Cole, she said politely, nodding several times. Please don't worry. The school will handle this seriously. Then she spun back toward me, her expression turning furious. Lily Carter, she shouted. Look at what you've done to Madison. Her finger pointed straight at my face. Call your parents right now and tell them to come pay for her medical expenses. I lowered my head slowly. My nails dug into my palms until the pain became sharp. A metallic taste spread across my tongue. No, that's not what happened, I tried to explain. Madison cornered me in the bathroom. She threw cold water on me and tore my clothes. I only grabbed her arm because I was trying not to fall, but I didn't get to finish. From the hospital bed behind us, Madison suddenly began to cry. It was a weak, trembling sound, the kind that made people immediately feel sympathy. Her voice shook just enough to sound believable. Dad, she's lying. My chest tightened. I was just walking past the stairs, Madison continued softly, and suddenly, Lily pushed me. She wiped tears from her eyes. She's always been jealous of me. That's not true, I said quickly, but Ms. Harper cut me off immediately. Enough, Lily. Her voice was sharp and full of irritation. The facts are already clear. Before I could react, she grabbed my arm roughly and dragged me out of the infirmary. The hallway outside was full of students and teachers passing by between classes. Every head turned. Curious eyes followed us. Ms. Harper snatched the phone from my hand and shoved it against my cheek. I don't want to hear any more nonsense, she snapped. Call your parents. Right now. Her voice grew louder so everyone could hear. Tell them to come here and take responsibility. People in the hallway stopped walking. Whispers began spreading. Some students looked curious. Others looked excited. Watching someone else's humiliation was apparently good entertainment. The phone in my hand felt cold. I stared down at the screen. My contact list filled the display. And suddenly my fingers felt heavy, because the truth was, I had 108 dads. Dad 1 was a union boss. Dad 3 was involved in weapons smuggling. Dad 15 ran a high-interest lending business. Dad 78 operated an underground casino. Every one of them was someone the police in Ravenwood City had been trying to catch for years. But whenever they handed me a black bank card or patted my head, they always said the same thing. Lily, don't go looking for trouble. Then they would pause. And if something ever happens, Dad 1 would speak calmly. I'll make their whole family disappear. Dad 3 would add quietly, anyone who hurts you, I'll deal with them myself. The memory made my hands tremble. I remembered them leaving home before sunrise, returning late at night, sometimes covered in small cuts, sometimes smelling faintly of metal they tried to hide. I remembered the news channels showing their wanted posters, again and again. I couldn't risk exposing them. I looked up at Ms. Harper one last time. My parents are working out of town, I said softly. They're very far away. They can't come. My throat tightened. I'll write an apology letter, I added quickly. I'll apologize in front of the whole school if I have to. I'll accept a disciplinary record. My voice almost broke. Just, please don't call them. Miss Harper let out a cold laugh. Working out of town? She crossed her arms. No wonder you turned out so shameless. Her eyes narrowed. Madison's medical examination. Her emotional distress. All of that costs money. She leaned closer. Can a poor scholarship student like you afford that? My fingers tightened around the phone. Call them. Don't waste my time. For a moment, I almost said I could pay it myself. My dads had given me several black cards. I had never used them. But before I could speak, Mr. Cole stepped forward. He pulled out a bank card and placed it directly into Ms. Harper's hand. "Ms. Harper," he said smoothly, "there's $50,000 on that card." She blinked. "A donation to the school." Then his tone hardened. "But I have one condition." He pointed at me. "Bring her parents here. I want them to admit their daughter's guilt and compensate my family properly." His eyes turned cold. "And if they refuse, I'll call the police." He leaned slightly closer. "And charge her with aggravated assault." The words hit me like ice water. "Once she has a criminal record," he continued calmly, "she can forget about ever going to college." Ms. Harper's eyes lit up the moment she saw the card. Her entire attitude changed. She turned back toward me with a stern expression. "Lily Carter," she said sharply, "did you hear that? This is your last chance. Call your parents right now. Either they come here to pay and apologize, or you'll have a criminal record." Her voice turned cold, "And you can say goodbye to college forever." Those two words echoed in my mind. Criminal record. I couldn't have one. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to graduate. I wanted to earn enough money to take care of my dads when they got older. My vision blurred. Slowly, I raised the phone. "Ms. Harper," I whispered, "please don't call the police." My fingers trembled over the contact list. "I'll call my parents." The screen glowed faintly. At the very top of my contacts was the name, Dad 1. Out of all my fathers, he was the calmest one, the most reasonable. I prayed he could pretend to be normal long enough to get me out of this. My finger pressed the call button. Beep, beep. The line connected almost instantly. Then a familiar warm voice filled my ear. "Lily?" Dad 1 speaking. I pressed my lips together. "The teacher wants you to come to school." There was a short pause. Then his voice suddenly sounded excited. "Your school? Oh, did my daughter win another award? This is the first time you've ever asked me to come pick up a certificate. Wait for me. I'm coming right now." A sharp pain hit my chest. "No," I started to stop him. But suddenly, a strange sound burst through the phone. A man shouting, heavy thuds, something hitting the ground. My entire body froze. Then I heard a calm voice in the background. Low, cold, almost bored. "Clean it up." Childhood memories flashed through my mind. Dad 1 coming home with stains he always called tomato sauce, the way he smiled too easily. Like nothing in the world could disturb him. His breathing sounded slightly uneven now, but when he spoke again, his tone returned to that gentle warmth. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" My heart pounded. Every word I wanted to say froze in my throat. "Nothing," I forced myself to say. "It's fine. I can pick up the award myself. Are you busy?" "I'll hang up now." "Hey," he protested. "You didn't even tell me what—" Before he could finish, Ms. Harper suddenly lunged forward and grabbed the phone from my hand. I instinctively dodged. The call ended instantly, and a second later, slap. Another sharp strike hit my face. Ms. Harper's expression twisted with anger. "You caused all this trouble and you're still trying to hide it from your parents?" Mr. Cole slammed his hand against the wall beside me. His finger pointed straight at my nose. "Don't think you can escape this by hiding behind adults," he growled. "In this part of Ravenwood City, I'm the one with influence. I have connections in the police department." His voice turned colder. "If you dare hurt my daughter, I'll make your entire worthless family disappear." Madison slowly approached us from the infirmary door. She was limping slightly, but the smile on her face was full of mockery. "You're so pathetic," she said. "You don't even dare call your parents. I bet your family can barely afford food." She tilted her head. "So where did you get the courage to push me?" My head lowered again. My voice felt as weak as a mosquito. "My parents really can't come." I swallowed. "I'm sorry, Madison. This was my fault. I shouldn't have pushed you. I can bow and apologize in front of the whole school. I can run errands for you for a year. Or you can hit me back. Just please don't call the police." My voice trembled. "I don't want to be expelled." Madison laughed softly, but Mr. Cole's expression darkened. "You think you can negotiate now?" He reached toward my phone again. "Give me your parents' number. I'll talk to them myself." Ms. Harper immediately stepped forward. "Lily, give your phone to Mr. Cole. Don't resist. You need to show a proper attitude if you want to solve this." She lunged forward. I clutched my phone tightly and stepped backward again and again, until my heel caught on the edge of a tile. I stumbled, then crashed to my knees. Cold floor, sharp pain, hot tears running down my face. But even then, I bowed. Please. Please don't involve my dads. I looked toward Madison. I'll do everything I said. You can hit me. I'll apologize. Just don't call them. Please. My forehead hit the ground. Once. Twice. Again. The skin on my forehead started to burn. Only then did a satisfied smile slowly appear on Madison's face. She raised her hand and stopped her father. Then she spoke as if she were granting mercy. Fine. But apologizing once isn't enough. Her voice turned sweet. Tomorrow morning, in front of the entire school. You'll bow 100 times, forehead to the ground. Until I'm satisfied. She smiled wider. And only then. I won't call the police. My fists clenched so tightly my nails cut into my skin. The humiliation burned inside my chest, thick, heavy, unbearable, but I still nodded. Okay. As long as my dads weren't dragged into this, it was worth it. That night, I returned to the small apartment I rented near school. My baseball cap was pulled low over my face, and exhaustion pressed heavily on my shoulders. Every step felt heavier than the last, but the moment I opened the door, I smelled food, real food, warm food. I froze. Voices came from the kitchen. When I stepped inside, I saw them. 3 men moving around my tiny kitchen like they owned the place. Dad, 66. Dad, 79. Dad, 93. The moment they noticed me, their faces lit up. Lily's home! Dinner's ready. Dad, 66, walked over immediately and pinched my cheek with a wide grin. Lily, I heard you're getting an award at school tomorrow, he said proudly. Why didn't you tell us to come watch? He crossed his arms and nodded confidently. According to the schedule, it should be my turn to attend school events. Dad, 79, immediately shook his head. That's nonsense. He stepped behind me and started massaging my shoulders with surprisingly skilled hands. It's my turn. Dad, 93, placed a bowl of soup in front of me. Drink this, he said calmly. It's good for your brain. You're going to get into a great university. My nose stung suddenly. For a moment, I thought I might cry, but I forced a small smile. It's just a small award, I said lightly. There's no need for you to come. I'll call you when it's something bigger. Okay? The 3 men looked at each other. Then Dad, 66, laughed. Fine. Eat first, kid. They kept piling food onto my plate as if I hadn't eaten in weeks. Watching them bustle around my tiny apartment felt strangely comforting. For a moment, I almost forgot what would happen the next morning. Halfway through dinner, Dad, 66, suddenly frowned. His phone buzzed. He answered quietly and stepped aside. I could only hear fragments of the conversation. Being watched again? Had to dump it in the river. Then he muttered under his breath. Damn. Money's getting harder to earn these days. A cold feeling crept up my spine. I slowly set down my fork. Dads, I said softly. They all looked at me. Could you stop doing that kind of work? The 3 of them froze. I took a deep breath. I'm already old enough. I'll get into a good university. I'll earn money. And I'll take care of all of you. My voice trembled slightly. So, can you find normal jobs instead? For several seconds, none of them moved. Then suddenly, Dad, 79, grabbed Dad, 93's arm. Our daughter, his voice cracked. She wants us to live honest lives. Dad, 93, wiped his eyes roughly. She wants us to change. Dad, 66, pounded his chest dramatically. We'll do it. I promise. We'll all go straight. 2 hours later, after giving me about 20 reminders to eat properly and sleep early, they stood up to leave. Before they walked out, Dad, 66, slipped another black bank card into my hand. Just in case, he said. The 3 of them hurried toward the door. I followed them into the hallway. Don't forget, I called after them. Change jobs. We know, they shouted back. The door closed. The hallway fell quiet, but just outside the door, Dad, 66, frowned slightly. That's strange, he muttered. Does Lily not like my nuclear submarine development project? Dad, 79, looked confused. Maybe she wants something more stable. Dad, 93, nodded seriously, and safer. Meanwhile, inside the apartment, I leaned against the door. My eyes burned. I slowly took out my phone. The group chat called My 108 Dads already had 999 unread messages. Dad, 14. Did Lily finish studying today? Dad, 27. Do you have enough money? Don't save it. Dad, 41. Did anyone bully you? Tell us immediately. Dad, 88. Eat dinner. Dad, 102. Sleep early. My vision blurred. I swallowed and typed slowly. I'm fine, everyone. Don't worry. You're all busy with work. Please take care of yourselves, too. The replies exploded instantly. Concerned emojis, messages reminding me to drink water, warnings not to stay up late, offers to send money. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I made a decision. No matter what happened, I would never cause trouble for my dads. Even if I had to endure humiliation, even if it hurt, I would handle it myself. Monday morning arrived like a guillotine. The entire school gathered on the field for the flag ceremony. Hundreds of students stood in neat rows. A sea of heads. A sea of phones held slightly too high. Everyone pretending they weren't recording. Ms. Harper handed me a sheet of paper like it was a sentence. My knees touched the ground. The grass was damp. The air felt cold against my skin. The microphone screeched once. Then silence spread across the field. I looked down at the paper. The words weren't mine, but I had to read them. My actions were driven by jealousy, I said. My voice echoed across the field. I pushed Madison Cole down the stairs. I was jealous of her family. I am a disgrace. Each sentence tasted like rust. Each word scraped against my throat. Madison sat in the front row, wrapped in a blanket, sitting in a wheelchair, looking like a fragile victim. Two girls stood behind her, holding the handles like attendants. Madison's eyes sparkled. Not with tears, with excitement. I bowed. My forehead hit the stage. 1, 2, 3. By the time I reached 10, my mind felt distant, as if I were watching someone else. By 50, pain pulsed through my forehead. By 100, my vision blurred. Warm liquid slid down my hairline. My body felt numb. I finished the final line of the apology, then slowly stood. My legs didn't feel like mine anymore. I stepped down from the stage. The crowd parted slightly. Like I was contagious. Whispers spread through the students. Poor rat. Scholarship kid? She was jealous. Look at her. Probably no one taught her manners at home. Someone laughed. Another voice spoke loudly enough for me to hear. Makes sense? I didn't look up. I walked back to my seat. When I reached my desk, I froze. Someone had written on it in thick red marker, liar, trash, psycho. I took out a wet wipe and tried to scrub it away, but the ink had already soaked into the wood. The harder I rubbed, the more it spread, like a bruise you couldn't erase. All day, the school building felt like it was leaning toward me. Teachers pretended not to see me. Students stared openly. Madison's friends passed by my desk giggling. Every time my phone vibrated, my heart jumped. I was terrified it might be one of my dads calling, asking why my voice sounded strange, asking why I sounded like I had been crying, but the messages were only from the group chat. Did you eat lunch? Drink water. Don't study too late. Call us if you need anything. I didn't reply, because if I did, if even one of them sensed something was wrong, Ravenwood City might burn. The final bell rang. Something inside me finally snapped. I grabbed my bag and rushed out before anyone could stop me. Instead of using the front gate, I walked behind the school toward a narrow service road. I just wanted to go home. Lock the door. Pretend the world wasn't full of whispers and laughter. But as I entered a narrow alley, 3 shadows peeled away from the wall, and a familiar voice spoke. Well, Madison said sweetly, look who decided to run. She rolled forward in her wheelchair, blocking the exit. 2 girls stood behind her, and a boy from my grade leaned against the wall with a lazy grin. Madison tilted her head. Then slowly, she stood up. Effortlessly, no limp, no pain. She stretched her legs like someone bored of sitting. My stomach dropped. She walked toward me slowly, heels clicking against the ground. Didn't you say you'd be my errand girl for a year? She asked. But look at you. School ends. And you're already running away. I stepped back instinctively. My heel splashed into a puddle. Mud stained my sock. Madison's smile widened. You really think you can play games with me? She said softly. In this city? In my school? One of her friends raised a small video camera. The lens clicked open, pointed straight at my face. Madison stepped closer until I could smell her perfume. Apologize again, she said. For the camera. My throat tightened. I said, Madison interrupted sharply. Say the words I tell you to say. I looked at the camera. If this video went online, my dads might see it. And if they saw it, no, that couldn't happen. Madison leaned closer. And remember, she whispered, I can still call the police. And maybe they'll want to meet your parents. My blood turned cold. She leaned back and waved her hand casually. Say it. Say you're trash. Say you're lucky I'm teaching you manners. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. Madison's smile became vicious. Fine, she said. Let's warm you up first. Cold water poured over my head. I gasped. My uniform clung to my skin. The group burst into laughter, and the camera kept recording everything. The cold water ran down my hair and neck, soaking through my uniform. My teeth clenched. The alley filled with laughter. Madison took the camera from her friend and stepped closer, filming my face from only a few inches away. Smile, she said lightly. Look grateful. My hands trembled at my sides. My body wasn't shaking because of the cold. It was panic. Madison tilted the camera slightly so the lens pointed directly into my eyes. Say it, she repeated. Say, thank you, Madison, for teaching me how to behave. My throat tightened. If this video spread online, the entire school would see it. If my dad saw it, no, that could never happen. Madison leaned closer and whispered playfully, or maybe I should call the police. Her eyes sparkled with cruel amusement. Then they'll come to school. And they'll want to meet those mysterious parents of yours. My blood felt like ice. Did she actually know anything, or was she just guessing? I couldn't take that risk. Not with my dad's. Not with their lives. Madison straightened and waved her hand like a director giving instructions. Go ahead. Say it. My lips moved slowly. Thank you, Madison. Louder, she said immediately. Thank you, Madison, for teaching me. The words felt wrong in my mouth, but I repeated them, again and again, until they stopped sounding like real words. Finally, Madison lowered the camera, satisfied. She stepped back and kicked lightly at my shin, not hard enough to leave a mark, just enough to make my knee buckle. See? She said cheerfully. You can learn. She turned around and began walking out of the alley. Her friends followed her, but before leaving, she looked over her shoulder. Starting tomorrow, she said casually, you wait here after school every day. If I tell you to carry my bag, you carry it. If I tell you to clean my shoes, you clean them. Understand? My voice felt broken. Okay. Madison laughed. Then the group disappeared down the street. The alley fell silent. For a long time, I didn't move. Water dripped from my hair onto the pavement. My backpack had fallen into a puddle. Books and papers were scattered everywhere. Slowly, I knelt down and began picking them up, one page at a time. My math exam lay half submerged in the dirty water. The bright red 100 at the top looked almost ridiculous now, like proof of something that didn't matter anymore. I blinked hard, forcing the burning behind my eyes down. Then I reached for my textbook and froze. Dirty footprints covered the front. Someone had stepped on it several times. My fingers shook. A sob tried to escape my chest. I swallowed it down. Then slowly, I looked up. At the entrance of the alley, several tall figures stood in the fading sunlight. 4, 5, maybe more. Men wearing dark jackets, broad shoulders, faces calm. At the front stood Dad 1, my biggest dad, the one whose voice always sounded warm no matter what kind of day he had. He wasn't moving, but something about the air around him felt heavy. Behind him stood others I recognized immediately. Dad 5, the one who wore glasses and looked like a college professor, until he smiled. Dad 3, the quiet one whose calm voice could silence an entire room. 2 other dads stood behind them, watching, protective. The alley suddenly felt very small. Dad 1 stepped forward slowly, then another step. He crouched in front of me carefully, like someone approaching an injured animal. His rough thumb brushed lightly against my cheek. When he pulled it back, his fingers were stained. Water, smudged lipstick, and something else. His jaw tightened. He didn't ask if I was okay. He could see the answer. Instead, he asked the only question that mattered. Who did this? My heart slammed against my ribs. I quickly turned my face away. A weak laugh escaped my throat. It was me, I said quickly. I slipped. It was stupid. I fell. I'm fine. Dad 1 didn't move. His eyes stayed on me. Behind him, Dad 5 bent down and picked up my ruined math book. He stared at the dirty footprints, then slowly looked up. The veins in his neck stood out sharply. This isn't from slipping, he said hoarsely. Someone stepped on this. Dad 3 adjusted his glasses. The reflection briefly hid his eyes. When he looked at me again, his gaze was sharp. Lily, he said quietly. Talk. I bit my lip hard. I couldn't say Madison's name. I couldn't mention Richard Cole. I couldn't mention Ms. Harper. Because Madison's father had money, connections. He had bragged about the police like they belonged to him, and my dads. My dads were wanted men. If they made one wrong move, everything would collapse. Their names would return to the news. Their lives would be ruined again. So I shook my head. Stubborn, terrified. I'm fine, I whispered. It's nothing. Please, just go. Don't get involved. Silence filled the alley. Heavy, long. Dad 1 looked at me carefully, like he was reading every lie written across my face. Then he exhaled slowly. Not angry, not relieved, just tired in a way that frightened me more than shouting ever could. He reached forward and took my hand. My fingers were ice cold. His palm was warm. Lily, he said gently, do you remember when you were 5? My throat tightened. He didn't wait for my answer. You came home crying because a boy from the next street stole your candy. You kept saying, it's okay, I don't need it. His thumb rubbed slowly across my knuckles, as if wanting your own candy back was something wrong. My eyes burned. I remembered it, the sticky wrapper in my pocket, trying to smile so my dads wouldn't get angry. Dad 1 lifted my chin gently back then and said the same words he was about to repeat now, in this house. His voice softened. You don't suffer alone. He looked at me quietly. Do you think staying silent protects us? There was no accusation in his voice, only truth. My lips parted, but no words came out. He leaned closer, his forehead almost touching mine. But listen carefully, he said slowly. You are the one we're protecting. My chest broke open. A sob escaped before I could stop it. Dad. 1 squeezed my hand. Behind him, Dad 5's breathing sounded rough. Dad 3 still hadn't blinked. Dad 1 spoke again. We made you a promise. If anyone lays a hand on you, we show up. Panic flooded my chest. No, I whispered desperately. You can't. I swallowed the word. Wanted. You can't do anything. Please, don't. Dad 1 glanced briefly toward the street behind us, as if calculating every camera, every risk. Then he looked back at me and smiled, the same warm smile I had seen my whole life, but this time it terrified me. Who said we're going to do anything illegal? He murmured. Dad 5 stepped forward holding my damaged textbook like evidence. Dad 3 pulled out his phone and tapped the screen twice. Something had already started. Dad 1 brushed the wet hair away from my forehead. We won't make a scene, he said calmly. We'll handle this cleanly. My breath caught. He stood up and gently guided me toward the street. Lily, he said softly, you're going to tell us everything. I shook my head violently. Tears streamed down my face. I can't. They said they'd call the police. They said I'd get a criminal record. They said college. Dad 1 wiped a tear from my cheek. And you believe them? His voice held quiet sadness. Because you're a good girl. He turned his head slightly. Take her home, he told the other dads calmly. My heart jumped. Home? Not my small apartment. He meant the real one, the place where 108 men called me their daughter. Then he added one more sentence. Still calm, still polite, still terrifying. Tomorrow morning, we're visiting your principal. I stopped breathing. And Ms. Harper, and Mr. Cole. A sob escaped my chest. Dad. He leaned down and pressed his forehead lightly against mine. Sweetheart, he whispered. You already bowed 100 times. His voice became softer than a whisper. You will never do that again. Dad 1's hand stayed around mine as we stepped out of the alley. Behind us, the other dads moved quietly, picking up my fallen books and placing them back into my bag, like nothing unusual had happened. No shouting, no threats, just quiet movement, but the air felt heavy. The kind of silence that comes before a storm. A black van was parked along the curb. The engine was already running. Dad 79 sat in the driver's seat. Dad 66 leaned in the passenger seat, chewing gum slowly like he was trying to grind his anger into dust. The moment they saw me, both of them froze. Not shocked, just hurt. Dad 66 opened the door immediately. Come here, kid, he said gently. I climbed into the van. My legs were shaking so badly it felt like my bones had turned soft. Dad 5 sat beside me and loosely wrapped an arm around my shoulders, light enough so I could breathe, firm enough so I wouldn't collapse. The door slid shut. The outside world became quiet. For the first time all day, I stopped holding it in. Ugly sobs burst out of my chest. Not silent tears, not quiet crying. Real sobs that made my chest ache. Dad 5 didn't say anything. He simply let me cry. Outside the van window, I saw Dad 1 still standing on the sidewalk. He hadn't gotten in yet. He held a phone to his ear. I couldn't hear what he was saying. After a few seconds, he ended the call and looked toward the van. Then he smiled at me. The same warm smile he always had, but his eyes were cold. The van started moving. We didn't drive to my small apartment. Instead, we headed to the place I secretly thought of as home. The building looked ordinary from the outside. Old brick, faded paint, a lobby that smelled faintly like coffee and lemon cleaner. But when the elevator doors opened, the hallway was full of men. So many men, not all 108 of them, but enough to make my chest tighten. Some were cooking, some were cleaning, some sat on the floor like they had been waiting for hours. The moment they saw me, everything stopped. Silence filled the hallway. Then chaos exploded. Baby Lily. Who made you cry? Who touched you? Hands reached toward me. Careful hands. Gentle hands. Dad 93 pushed a bowl of warm water toward me with a cloth. Dad 72 knelt down in front of me. The same dad who once found a candy wrapper in my pocket when I was 5. He looked at my swollen cheek, my wet hair, the tear in my sleeve. His voice softened. We're here, he said quietly. Okay? I nodded, because if I tried to speak, I would break again. Across the room, Dad 3 stepped forward. He held my phone. I found something, he said calmly. The room immediately became silent. He tapped the screen. A video started playing. It wasn't the one Madison recorded. It was another video. The image shook slightly. It had been filmed very close. My face, wet hair, bright lipstick smeared across my cheek like a mark. Madison's voice filled the room. Say it. Say you're trash. My own voice followed. Small, obedient. Thank you, Madison, for teaching me. Laughter echoed behind the camera. Then the video repeated. My stomach dropped. I lunged forward instinctively. Turn it off! But Dad 5 gently caught my wrist. Watch, he said quietly. I shook my head violently. No, please. But he didn't let go. You don't carry their shame, he said. Dad 3 paused the video, then switched to another clip. Madison standing up from her wheelchair in the alley, stretching her legs casually, her friend laughing. The video camera lens opening with a click. Madison's voice again. I can still call the police. Dad 3 turned the screen so everyone could see. Did she send this? Someone asked. Dad. 3 shook his head. She posted it. Private story. Close friends. He paused. And she forgot something. The niece of the school scholarship committee president follows her. The room became so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming. Then someone behind me spoke. Very softly. She did that to our daughter. It wasn't anger. It was worse. It sounded like devotion sharpening into something dangerous. I turned. Dad 1 had arrived. I hadn't even heard him come in. He stood by the doorway like he had always been there. His sleeves were rolled up slightly. His hair was a little messy, like he had just come from a normal office job. He walked forward and placed a folder on the coffee table. A folder. Paperwork. My brain struggled to process it. Dad 1 looked around the room. When he spoke, every voice disappeared instantly. Everyone breathe, he said calmly. Then he looked at me. Lily, I'm going to ask you something. My throat tightened. He waited. Did you push her on purpose? My voice broke. No. My knees gave out. I crouched down, hugging myself. She cornered me in the bathroom. She poured water on me. She tore my clothes. I grabbed her because I panicked. My voice trembled. I didn't mean to make her fall. Dad 1 placed a hand gently on the back of my head. You didn't, he said firmly. You reacted. That's not a crime. I stared at him. Teachers had called me heartless. Students called me jealous. Madison called me trash. But Dad 1 spoke like the truth was obvious. You were being hurt, he said quietly. Then he stood up and looked around the room. Now, he said calmly, we handle this properly. He opened the folder. Inside were printed screenshots, documents, timestamps. My heartbeat stuttered. One of the papers was the incident report from school, the one Ms. Harper forced me to sign. Dad 1 tapped it lightly. She altered Lily's statement, he said evenly. The nurse's report doesn't match. The stairwell camera footage doesn't match. And Madison's injury doesn't match her physical therapy records. Someone inhaled sharply. Dad 1 pulled out another document. Mr. Cole's donation. It was a printed bank record. It went through the school's discretionary account, not the legal foundation. He placed it down. That's bribery. Another paper. A message from Ms. Harper to Mr. Cole. Dad 1 read the line calmly. Don't worry. I'll make sure she bows. My stomach twisted. Dad 1 looked back at me. Lily, he said softly. I know you were afraid of the police. I shrank slightly. He nodded once, so I called them. The entire room froze. I stopped breathing. Dad 1 raised a hand gently. Not the ones Mr. Cole thinks he owns. He spoke calmly. A lawyer who owes me nothing. A state investigator who owes nobody. And the school board. Dad 5 added quietly, we filed a formal complaint. Dad 3 spoke next, with evidence. Dad 72 handed me a tissue. You did the brave part, he whispered. You survived. My voice shook. But you're... I couldn't say it. Criminals. Wanted men. Dad 1 understood anyway. We don't have to show our faces to protect you, he said. We only need the truth. He crouched down and held my hands. Tomorrow morning, he said gently. You're going to school. My heart stopped. I can't. He squeezed my hands once. You will, because you're not running anymore. My eyes filled again. And you won't go alone. The next morning, I walked toward Ravenwood High School feeling like my heart might break through my ribs, not because I wasn't afraid. I was terrified, but this time, I wasn't alone. Walking beside me was a woman in a dark navy suit, Mrs. Castillo, our lawyer. She looked ordinary in the way that meant she absolutely wasn't. Calm posture, sharp eyes, the kind of presence that made people move aside without realizing why. Behind her walked 2 men with quiet expressions and identification clipped to their belts. Not local police. State investigators. They didn't speak. They didn't threaten anyone. They simply walked. But their presence alone changed the air. As we entered the front gate, whispers immediately started spreading through the courtyard. That's her. The scholarship girl. Why are investigators here? Students stopped talking. Phones appeared. Madison sat near the entrance to the main office, still in her wheelchair. The blanket carefully arranged over her legs. She was smiling. Right up until she saw Mrs. Castillo. Then she noticed the investigators. Then she noticed me. Her smile trembled. Just slightly. A few seconds later, Ms. Harper stepped out of the main office. She walked forward like a queen stepping onto a stage. Then she saw the investigators. Her expression changed instantly. Not fear, calculation. She opened her mouth. But Mrs. Castillo spoke first. Her voice was calm, clear. Ms. Harper, she said, we're here regarding a formal complaint involving harassment, retaliation, and the falsification of a student statement. Ms. Harper laughed quickly. Too quickly. This is ridiculous, she said. Lily Carter attacked another student. One of the investigators calmly raised a phone. And this, he said quietly, is a video of the injured student walking normally immediately after the incident. Madison's head snapped toward him. Her eyes widened. Her mouth opened slightly. Mrs. Castillo turned the screen just enough for Madison to see it. Color drained from Madison's face. That, she stammered. That was, she forced me to... The second investigator calmly pulled several printed screenshots from a folder. Your account posted a video of you coercing the student in an alley, he said. Madison stared at the papers like they might explode. Ms. Harper's face turned pale. Then suddenly, like a cornered animal, she tried to regain control. You don't understand, she snapped. At that moment, a voice spoke from behind us. Mr. Cole is here. Richard Cole walked through the front doors. He moved with the confidence of a man who had never lost an argument in his life. He saw the investigators. Didn't blink. He saw Mrs. Castillo. Smiled slightly. You're making a mistake, he said smoothly. I donate a great deal of money to this school. I know many important people. Mrs. Castillo lifted a printed document. You donated, she corrected calmly, to an account not authorized for charitable funds. Richard Cole's smile flickered, only for half a second, then it returned. That doesn't prove anything. The investigator turned toward him. It proves we will be opening an investigation, he said, and it proves you will stop contacting the student and her family immediately. Richard Cole's eyes shifted toward me. Cold, angry. He stepped forward, but one of the investigators moved in front of him with a simple step. Not aggressive, just final. Richard Cole's jaw tightened. What family? He said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. He looked at me with open contempt. Who exactly is going to defend you? You don't even have— Excuse me, Mrs. Castillo interrupted calmly. She handed him another document. This is Lily Carter's guardianship paperwork, and a restraining order request that has already been filed. Richard Cole looked down at the paper. For the first time, his expression changed. Not anger, confusion, because someone had finally handed him something he couldn't buy away immediately. Behind him, Madison made a small sound. Dad? The investigator turned toward her. Miss Cole, he said, we'll need a statement, and your phone. Her fingers tightened around the wheelchair handles. Then, without thinking, she stood up, right there, in the middle of the lobby. The blanket slid off her lap. No limp, no hesitation, just standing. 100 students saw it happen. The building became completely silent. Madison froze, because she realized what she had just done. Someone whispered from the back of the hallway, "She can walk." Another voice said louder, "She was faking it." I didn't move. I didn't smile. I simply watched. Ms. Harper's face turned the color of paper. Richard Cole's expression darkened into something ugly, but something had changed. For the first time since everything started, they looked small, because the truth was bigger than their power. By lunchtime, Ravenwood High felt like a completely different place. Not kinder, not suddenly fair, just awake. Rumors spread everywhere. Videos appeared. Students who had laughed during my apology avoided looking at me. When I reached my classroom, I noticed something strange. My desk was clean. The red marker words were gone. The janitor gave me a quiet nod as he passed, like an apology he didn't know how to say. That afternoon, the principal called for a school assembly. No screaming microphones, no forced confessions, just a short statement. "We are currently investigating serious misconduct," the principal said stiffly. "The safety of all students will be ensured." I waited for the moment when they would blame me again, but it never came. Instead, Mrs. Castillo stepped forward. She didn't tell my entire story. She didn't turn my pain into entertainment. She simply said, "Coercion is not discipline. Humiliation is not education. And the law does not belong to whoever pays the most." When I left school that day, the alley behind the building was empty. No camera, no perfume, no laughter. I didn't feel victorious, just tired, like someone had finally lifted my face off the ground after holding it there for too long. That evening, when I opened the apartment door, the place was full again. Not just 3 dads, many more. They tried to act normal. Someone offered snacks. Someone handed me a blanket. Someone had bought a new backpack identical to my old one. Even my ruined math book had been replaced. I sat down on the couch and stared at it. Then suddenly my voice broke. "I'm sorry," I whispered. The room went silent. Dad One looked up from the table. "Why?" he asked gently. "For making you come," I said. "For risking everything. I tried so hard to keep you safe." Dad One stood up and walked over. Then he did something that broke me more than anger ever could. He rested his head lightly against mine. "We spent most of our lives doing things that made the world dangerous," he said quietly. My breath caught. "And then you appeared," he continued, "and made us want to become better men." Around the room, I heard quiet movements. Men swallowing hard. Men pretending they weren't listening. Dad One squeezed my hand. "And you think protecting us means letting yourself be destroyed?" I shook my head helplessly. He pulled back slightly and looked into my eyes. "Lily," he said softly, "you are not the price we pay for our mistakes." His thumb brushed my knuckles. "You are the reason we try to stop making them." The room stayed silent. Then Dad 72 cleared his throat. "We talked," he said awkwardly. My heart skipped. "About jobs," Dad 93 added. "Real ones." Dad 66 raised his hand slightly. "My submarine project is technically legal." Everyone looked at him. He coughed. "Okay, fine. We'll be normal." A small laugh escaped me through my tears, and somehow that tiny laugh made the entire room breathe again. Dad One squeezed my hand. "We may not be saints," he said, "but we can still be your family." I nodded. "Okay." Spring came slowly. The investigation didn't fix everything overnight, but it drew clear lines. Ms. Harper was suspended while the investigation continued. Richard Cole stopped showing up at school like he owned the place. Madison's friends disappeared from her side almost instantly, and the video of me repeating my apology never appeared online, because the investigators had Madison's phone, and the truth moved faster than her cruelty. One afternoon, A letter arrived. My university scholarship renewal. Full coverage. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. When I finally read the words, my vision blurred. Dad 1 appeared beside me almost instantly. What happened? He asked. I handed him the letter. He read it once, then again. Then he inhaled sharply. Everyone! He shouted. The apartment exploded. Men who had faced bullets without blinking suddenly panicked over a piece of paper. Someone lifted me off the ground. Someone spun me in circles. Someone shouted, "Who's cutting onions?" Dad 1 didn't shout. He simply pulled me into a tight hug. You did it, he whispered. I held him just as tightly. No, I whispered back. We did. Because that was the truth. I had tried to survive alone. But real family wasn't something you protected by suffering in silence. It was something that held you up when you couldn't stand anymore. That night, the My 108 Dads group chat reached 999 messages again. But this time, instead of writing, "I'm fine," I sent a photo. The acceptance letter, my hands holding it. My face still swollen from crying. The replies exploded. That's my daughter! Who's taking her to campus? She needs a new laptop. Buy snacks? No, she needs normal life. I laughed until my stomach hurt. Later that night, when the apartment finally became quiet, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. For the first time in a long time, silence didn't feel dangerous. It felt like peace. Outside my door, I could hear my dad's talking quietly. Soft footsteps, a kettle boiling, normal sounds. The kind I had always wanted. Tomorrow I would go back to school. People might still whisper. Some might still look away. But I would walk those hallways with my head held high. Because I wasn't trash. I wasn't alone. And if anyone ever tried to push me down again, I would never bow. Not even once. Never.